September 13th, we're here for our regular board meeting. Commissioner Mullen has been called out for the practice emergency management. They have a practice run on this thing, so he's been called out to that. We have two commissioners present, so we have a quorum. We have our administrator and the clerk of the board. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the August 30th meeting minutes. Is there any additions, corrections, or revisions? So that is taken care of. Next is the vouchers.
This morning, we have one financial matter. It's fund expenditures. Move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $681,896.35. Note for the record, this has been reviewed and signed by two representatives from the county auditor's office and presented to us for approval.
I second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have the approval of the consent agenda. There are 4 items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of the consent agenda, 4 items as presented.
I second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, with that, we'll have to have a 2 to 3 minute recess as we set up for the exit conference with the state auditor's office, and they are going to set it up for the hearing impaired. So at this point, we'll take a 2 to 3 minute recess.
Are we ready to begin?
Just a second. Okay, we are good to go, Shane, so take a hold of the reins.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to share the results of the county's most recent audit. My name is Shane Parkhurst, the audit lead, and joining me today are two members of my team that are assisted in conducting your audit. Deborah O'Leary, Assistant Audit Manager, and Jenny Waltman, Audit Manager. Before we get started today, it is important to note that presentation we have prepared for you today represents an overall summary of our completed audit to supplement this presentation. Please note that we have also provided a packet of information that will include copies of our audit reports to be issued and related audit recommendations. While we do not plan to speak from the packet today, we are prepared to reference where you can locate the results being shared within your packet. Also today, we will cover the financial and federal audit. To meet the federal deadline, we had to separate the accountability audit, which will begin shortly. With that, let's begin. Whether you're new to the audit process or have been through one in the past, understanding the audit's results is important to establishing and maintaining good government. First, audits help build trust in your organization by letting you know whether things are working or whether there are areas that might need fine-tuning. Audits can shine a light on areas that are important to your citizens, external stakeholders, and your own employees. Second, as an independent organization that conducts over 2,600 audits of state and local governments each year, our audit can be relied upon to provide transparent results directly to your citizens. And lastly, audit recommendations are made to assist your government in continuing to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of its operations. Our goal today will be to make sure you understand the results of your audit and answer any questions you might have. We conducted a financial statement audit for the period of January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. The objective of a financial statement audit is to issue an opinion as to whether the information included in the financial statements can be relied upon to make decisions. We are pleased to report that we are issuing an unmodified, clean audit opinion on the county's financial statements. This is the opinion you want to receive and provide assurance that the financial statements are stated fairly and are materially correct. Additionally, it is important to note that our audits are conducted in accordance with government auditing standards. Those standards also require that we gain an understanding of the county's internal controls or process that it goes through to prepare the financial statements for audit. Should we identify a weakness or concern with that process that could or did result in significant errors in the financial statement, we would be required to bring those to your attention and include that information in our report. We have identified a deficiency that we consider significant and allowed for a material misstatement in the financials. This has to do with revenue recognition. We will talk about this here shortly. Lastly, audit standards also require us to consider compliance with applicable laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements where non-compliance could affect the fair presentation of the financial statements. You'll see that your report indicates that the county complies with the aforementioned. The results are detailed on page 13 of your packet. In relation to our financial statement audit, professional audit standards also require that we share with you whether there are any uncorrected misstatements that remain in the audited financial statements. We have included in your packet a full listing of these items, but please note that we have concluded these items are deemed immaterial or small in nature and do not affect the overall opinion being issued on the county's financial statements. Additionally, these items have been shared with the county management, and we are confident they will work on correcting these items when preparing future financial statements. The county received a new source of revenue from the American Rescue Plan Act, also referred to as ARPA. The funding is received in advance. The county reported $9.2 million in revenue. The county was unaware that the funding should be reported as deferred inflows, also with liability, until the funding is expensed. Once expensed, it is coded as revenue. In 2021, the county only had $82,000 in ARPA expenditures. The county has since fixed this issue, but since it is material, we are required to report it as a finding. Okay, go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you, Shane. The next type of audit that we conducted was a federal audit, and the purpose of this audit is to determine whether or not the county complies with federal requirements of the federal programs that we selected. And on this slide is the overall summary of our federal audit report, and we looked at fiscal year 2021. So the first part of our audit report talks about whether or not the county complies with all the requirements of the major federal programs. And based on our review, we determined the county complies with all material requirements of the federal program. As a result, we issued an unmodified opinion on the federal program. In addition, governmental auditing standards require us to look at your internal controls over your federal compliance areas to make sure you have controls in place to comply with the requirements. And based on our review of the internal controls, we identified no significant deficiencies and no material weaknesses. And so overall, your federal audit was a clean audit report. The program that we selected to audit was the Highway Planning and Construction Program. This program covered about 74% of all of your federal expenditures for the county. And in conducting this program, two of the key areas that we looked at were making sure that the costs charged to the program were allowable and supported. And another area that we focused on was making sure that the county complied with procurement requirements of this program, and also making sure that the contract that they awarded it to was not suspended or dissolved. And these are two significant requirement areas that we looked at. And as mentioned previously, we identified no concerns with your federal audit.
Now that we have shared the results of the county's fiscal year 2020 audit, we do have a few closing remarks to bring to your attention to conclude our presentation. First, we are pleased to report that the cost of our engagement is expected to be within the estimate previously provided. Our next audit will include a financial statement, a federal, and accountability audit, and this will be in 2023. However, we still have a 2021 accountability audit to perform, which will begin here shortly. We expect the county's report to be published on our website in 1 to 2 weeks. If you have not already, you can sign up to receive an email notification on when reports are released, as well as other news articles alerts, including resources our office publishes. The audit liaison will receive a survey, and we appreciate any feedback you can provide about our audit services. Before we wrap up our presentation today, we would like to thank county management and officials for their assistance and cooperation during our audit. Specifically, we'd like to extend our appreciation to Tim Anderson and Thomas Westerman for making this audit finish in a timely manner. This concludes our presentation to the county on our fiscal year 2020 audit. We thank everyone for your time today and your participation at this meeting. We'd like to open it up for any last comments or questions regarding our audit.
Questions, comments?
No question, just a comment. Thanks to the audit team, Mr. Westerman and Mr. Anderson in particular. Unfortunately, with audits like this, it's kind of a pass-fail. You either get beat up for making mistakes, or you get, okay, you didn't have any mistakes. There's rarely credit for doing a great job, and I've seen now with enough organizations how many potential traps there are when it comes to especially federal funds and highway projects and new funding like ARPA. So to the folks who had their hands on that process and produced a clean audit, well done, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Shane.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll have to take a 2 to 3 minute break again to get out of this and back into our regular. Okay, we have come out of the recess. We're back to the regular meeting, and at this point in time, we'll go into the Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. This past week, I participated in the groundbreaking event for the Dairygold plant that's being built in Franklin County. I recognize the effort of the port and the city, other partners in the area that have helped make that possible. Commissioner Mullen, who is unfortunately not in attendance at our meeting today, was also a participant in that groundbreaking ceremony. Also been spending some time working on the continuity of operations at the HAPO Center, meeting with a potential contractor and staff to make sure that we are going to continue to be able to provide events during the transition time frame. I think everything's on schedule, but obviously we've got some more work to do there. Kind of ties into some of the other personnel and recruiting efforts that I've been involved in over the past few days. It's the time of year that we're working on the budget, so I'm spending a fair amount of time on budget analysis and preparation. And then we had a meeting in Benton County with our partners in the Juvenile Justice Center, reviewing the cost estimates for the remodel effort that is taking place. Those costs, obviously with inflation and other factors, are significantly higher than they had hoped. So we're looking at options there to either scale down the scope of that project or apply for additional federal or state funding to help offset some of those increased costs. But that process is in progress as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Peck.
Let's see, last week participated in the State Association of Counties meeting with Attorney General Ferguson, who did an update on the federal opioid settlement. Washington State was one of the states that sued on this matter, and as a result, we stand to get a larger settlement than some of the counties that didn't participate in the legislation. But it's still necessary to get a certain percentage of the total counties to sign on. I think it's by the 22nd of this month, give or take. And the AG took time to press the point that none of the counties in the state are going to get any funds if we don't get enough people to sign in. I personally think we will, but it's a significant issue. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, all of which are, by virtue of the settlement, to be directed toward treatment programs only. So it's a pretty big deal. The state legislature, as I've mentioned in previous meetings, has put together a committee at the state level to study ways to improve the economics of the aerospace and aviation industry in the state of Washington. Myself and about 24 other people, I think, were selected to be on this. We met last week. I've mentioned some of the details in the past about unmanned or unpiloted aerial vehicles and some efforts to create future vertiports, which are vertical airports in the Puget Sound region. Very forward-looking, long-range kind of stuff. Had a meeting with my co-chair from the State Legislative Steering Committee, which is essentially the lobbying arm of the State Association of Counties. We're continuing our work on preparing the legislative agenda that we will take to the legislature January and February to promote county issues and concerns and specific legislation in some cases. And this week we had another WASAC update. This time it was on broadband and broadband funding, and there's another $200 and some million that's come available from the federal government for broadband. It requires a 25% match, and typically those funds tend to go to urbanized areas simply because the number of people to be served is one of the important criteria. And I think I'll just note that on that particular one, I had some concern because one of the criteria is last mile, meaning your project doesn't just get to extend fiber down a highway, it actually has to go to users. And it raises the question of, is it proper for public money to be spent to take it from the trunk across somebody's private property to their home, as opposed to having the provider do that. So most of this week obviously was with State Association of Counties business. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullins not here. Last week I had the veterans meeting. They had 60 people apply for the VSO position. They narrowed it down to 26, and then they interviewed 6, and they ended up hiring John LeVray. I hope I'm saying his name right, but he's 20 years Marine officer, and they're really excited about the VSO position being filled with this gentleman and looking for big things. Ben Franklin Transit had another meeting over there, and it's getting we've got a new general manager, and she is doing an incredible job. She has 20 people have either left or been dismissed in the upper level management, and she made the comment that she's not going to fill those positions. 2 of the department heads have been excused from their job because of their unwillingness to come back to the office and do work, and they are doing an incredible job as to looking at the Ben Franklin Transit bus system and what is truly needed here in the Tri-Cities. And as we well know, she came over and did an analysis at Franklin County. The most people they saw on a bus was 5, and therefore they're leaning really heavily towards the smaller buses and using the hub to get the ridership for the bigger buses. So she's really doing a good job. And then the Port Pasco meeting. But that's pretty much my last week. Takes us down to public comment. Is there anybody in the room for public comment?
I want to start with praise to our County Road Department office staff. In particularly, Robert and Leanne. Their sense of urgency, professionalism, and compassion towards the taxpayers of Franklin County are something to be proud of. However, I have mixed feelings about what brought me there in the first place. As a requirement of putting in a new access road to my new home, I'm required to install an apron extending 15 feet off the edge of the county road. As I believe this is practical to protect the investment of the county, this requirement is extremely one-sided. First off, private citizens are expected to do this. However, one can drive through the county and see gravel and dirt roads leaving blacktop without such aprons. Secondly, private citizens do not have the access to state and federal money that the county has access to. Third, there are instances such as mine where the county road affected is on a list to undergo construction to make it an all-weather road, making it necessary to tear out the investment the taxpayer makes in order to bring the county road up to standard. My request to the council, out of a sense of fairness, help private citizens by making public funding more accessible for required projects such as this, and also show the same concern towards conserving our infrastructure by setting a higher priority on bringing county roads up to the same standards you require of private citizens. And finally, on non-all-weather roads, which are on the list to be rebuilt, offer exceptions that would prevent taxpayers from spending money on projects that will be torn out in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
My name is John Rose, and I have several comments. The first one is with our auditor, Matt Beaton, who I don't think is here now, but that's all right. Matt and Jeff and basically his whole crew have done a wonderful job, have quite a lot of integrity in the methodology, the workflow that they have in counting, processing, and basically conducting our election count, our ballot counts. I was very impressed with a lot of the things that I saw, but one in particular, when they did the first audit, Matt Beaton, and they basically pulled his race. He had one more vote than he actually had in the hand count on the machine. Sure. I have to stand pretty close, okay. Anyway, they picked up an extra vote from Matt. And Shannon, I think she spent a total of 5 hours trying to figure out what was going on. And what it was, in the end, was literally a software phenomena when they actually rectify, or if you will, correct things that are wrong on the scan. The very last step, if your cursor is on and over a button, it'll actually activate it. And they have to move the screen, or if you will, this ballot, to center it to see it all. It's literally a software problem. But it's very hidden. And she spent 5 hours trying to find out why Matt had an extra vote in that audit. I was just very, very impressed with the integrity of that whole system. The second thing is Sheriff Raymond is understaffed. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, he had a half-dressed man down on Court Street, somewhere down the 80th block, 80th Road, not in his right mind. And 2 of his deputies spent about 16 hours. I may not be paraphrasing this quite right, but nevertheless, you may have read that. His officers were occupied for 16 hours, which again gave them a short staff for that day, and indeed the day following because of the hours involved. I think that you need to be aware of the fact that he is short-staffed. He is calling out that. He has said that in his statements publicly and also in his written documents. And I don't think that our community is, sorry, that's my 3 minutes, but I don't think our community is getting any smaller or certainly any less safe. That's not what I wanted to say. Our community is actually becoming less safe because of the homeless and the drug situation and people like such as I've given you an example. That's my first comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the
I
phone?
do have a caller on the phone.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You are in the commissioner's room. You have 3 minutes, please, for your comment.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm calling to register my objection to the draft minutes of the August 30th meeting. As the first paragraph under public comment is not only inaccurate, but woefully brief in comparison to the summaries offered for every other speaker under public comment that date. I called in to object to the assessor's deliberate personal use of a county vehicle, not just the quote, use of a county vehicle, end quote. I also urged the Commission ensure a central policy governing use of county vehicles and compliance be monitored, all to protect taxpayers' interests. I believe an accurate summary of my 3-minute statement should include at least the following. The caller objected to the fact that the county assessor had used a county vehicle for personal benefit. She urged the commission to establish and maintain central policy control of county vehicles and monitor department compliance to protect taxpayer interests. I would appreciate a corrective amendment of the minutes accordingly. Thank you for your consideration, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Good morning, Commissioners. What Mr. Rose shared with us, I'd like to share a story that happened to me about a week and a half ago. I was here in downtown, had a meeting until about 10:30 at night, and was headed home, and I typically zigzag through downtown to just see. I'm trying to learn and to understand the area better. And as I was going past one of our local businesses, Mill and Power Tool, the parking lot is very well lit, and I seen a man that was walking in the direction of the doorway. So I circled the block, I parked in the dark, and I just watched for a minute to see what was going on, and rapidly became apparent that he wasn't in his right mind. He was not meaning any harm to the business there. So I watched for a little bit, and seeing that I didn't think there was any harm to myself, so I pulled up and I talked to this individual for probably close to 45 minutes. And the part that discouraged me was I didn't know of anything that I could do to help this individual. There was no location that I knew of that would take him. I could call the police department, but there's not really anything that they can do. Same with the sheriff's department. I knew the emergency room doctor on duty that night, so I called him, explained what I was seeing, took a video, and sent it to him, and I said, is there any way that I can help this individual? And the long and the short of it, the answer was no. So with the possibility of some funds coming for assistance with mental health and with issues, would encourage you to get engaged in this process. I know that you are already, but we have got to do something to help the individuals that are underserved and unserved in our community. And it has really been heavy on my heart for the almost 2 weeks now, because I'm a pretty resourceful guy. I can reach out to a lot of people. I know a lot of people, and I still don't, as of this moment, I don't know of how I could help that individual. I asked him where he was staying that night. He said, well, I can't stay in Pasco because they have a no camping rule, so I got to go across the river. And I said, well, where are you going to stay over there? And he said, well, I'll probably have to climb on top of a building and sleep on top because it's the only safe place. And I had a good conversation with him, but I didn't know how I could help him. He wasn't hungry. He had just eaten. He was fairly clean. He had a knapsack with his stuff with him, but he needed help. I asked him if I could get him help, and he's like, well, I don't know where to go. And I didn't know where to help him to go. So just information from your community that as you go through the process of making decisions on behalf of our community and allocating resources, consider this does happen right here. Thank
Mr.
you.
Bowen, did you ask him if he was a veteran?
I did, and he was not.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
George Dockstutter, 4951 Self Landing Road. A couple comments. I was glad to see Commissioner Peck at the groundbreaking for Mirror Industries, and was disappointed that we didn't have more public officials there. It's a worthwhile cause, and I'm glad to see it's finally getting off the ground. The second thing I want to talk about, I want to know what we're doing about lifting the moratorium on any zone changes or developments in Franklin County. You put a 6-month moratorium on, and we're almost a month into it, and I haven't heard anything about what's being done to get it lifted or where we're going. And I'd like to get some answers, not only for myself, but Government Affairs Committee for the Association of Realtors would like to also know. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Nobody else on the phone, Keith?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll move down to the approval to hire a public defense attorney at grade 20, step 4. Mr. Ziegler.
Actually, this be the second or third time we've talked about this, so I don't know if I want to go over everything again. I tried to make the ASR as comprehensive as possible to give you a picture of what we're doing and why. As far as hiring this individual, I think the key word in the ASR is comparability. We're bringing him over from Benton County, so I wanted to start him at something that was competitive, and I want to start him at something that's comparable to what the Benton County or Franklin County prosecutors are getting. And the number that
Mr. Ziegler, I'm sorry for the interruption, but could you maybe get a little closer to the mic? I don't think anybody else can hear you, and there's going to be some questions, and I want them to hear your answers.
Again, I just, the key word here is comparability. This individual comes to us from Benton County. Obviously, we had to come up with a number that at least initially was attractive enough to get his interest. And the final number here represents the result of our negotiations and compromises. But comparability refers not just to what Benton County pays, but what Franklin County prosecutors currently enjoy. It's not exact, but it's close enough that we came to an agreement. And this individual is particularly attractive since I could start him on the 23rd. He's qualified for B violent felonies in Class C. If things work out, I think we can get him up to Class A very quickly. So I'm strongly recommending that the board accept the proposal.
Questions?
Trying to recall from,
I don't think our mics
I don't think my mic's working either now. That's what I get for bringing it up.
They're all dead now.
Yeah, the light's on the mic, but it's not working.
Wouldn't mind speaking very loudly then, so the people in the back of the room can hear you.
Yep.
Me? I've already had my say, so I hope.
So if I hey, it sounds like it's working.
There
There
you
you go. If I remember correctly, we've had previous conversations about the possibility of having staff attorneys in OPD, some or all. And one of the questions was, is that cost-effective contract versus employee? And I'm working from memory now, I can't pull it up quickly, but I think I saw in the read aheads a reference to cost effectiveness. So my question is, if we, when we compare the cost to taxpayers of having a contract attorney versus an employee, is that using the county employee all-in costs with benefits and everything compared to a contract cost, or are we just looking at salaries between the two?
I think salary and benefits, you're talking a more expensive proposition.
Okay,
That has always been the attraction of the contract system.
Well, sure.
The counties were picking up a service that basically they were getting bargain basement.
Right.
Over the years, over the last 25, 30 years, you now have a situation where it's driven the impetus to convert to employee status and at the same time drive up the rate of compensation. If you look at what King County pays now in salary and benefits, I mean, it would probably cause your eyebrows to shoot up a little bit.
Yeah, I try not to look to King County for an example for anything in Franklin County, so let's just skip that one. But so the comparison is, and obviously I knew this answer. You've told me don't ask questions you don't know the answer to. Obviously, it's more expensive when you roll in the cost of benefits, but there's some intangibles that offset that. One is that you have attorneys for a longer period of time who are more familiar with the system, more familiar with our counties. With our county, we don't have a revolving door of attorneys coming and going. It seems that it's feast or famine. So I just want to acknowledge that there are some intangibles that maybe aren't as apparent as we would like that offset the additional cost of having someone who is an employee. Is that a substantial difference if we had, if we just said, you know, state law requires us to have a prosecutorial staff and state law requires us to have a defense counsel staff. So the requirement is the same and it comes from the same legislative body in Olympia. So my question is it your view that we ought to have, there it goes again, is it your view that we ought to have all of our defense counsel be employees, and if not, some rough idea of what percentage?
It's too early to give you a definitive answer to that.
Okay.
I think the answer I gave you before is the one I would be comfortable sticking with. If we're going to do it, we ought to do it incrementally, and let's try out the mix first and see where we're at. Particularly, my concern has always been how much is it going to cost us up front. Right now, the primary limitation that we're starting to see just by virtue of this hire here is space. And Keith and I have talked about this several times. Where are we going to put them? And what kind of support people are we going to have for this person? I don't have an answer right now. This individual might have to share an office with me on a temporary basis till we find a place. But those initial upfront costs, you have to pay attention to. The other thing I think that you touch on, when you talk about what comes from the legislature, that's incremental too. And what we pay for one year, we suddenly find ourselves paying more for the next year because new duties and obligations have been foisted down the chain to the county, either by the legislature or the state Supreme Court. And that makes it expensive in the long run. And there's no way to give a definitive answer right now at this point. Here's the bottom line. This is what it's going to cost you. I can't tell you that. I might get close and I might not. I might be under and I might be over. So I'm much more comfortable trying it this way first.
I'm assuming there's no difference in the case caps for contract versus employee?
No.
And
No,
we've already
it's-
talked about revolving door of contract attorneys being one of the attractive reasons to go to an employee. Since the public is listening and it's their money we're about to spend.
Yep.
What are the other advantages to having an employee versus a contractor? You've just spoken to some of the deficits, the cost of staff, the cost of office space and so forth. So
One of the things you'll see is, I have found over the years that the younger the attorney, the more likely that person is to want to be a contractor. Particularly when it's a contract that allows for a limited private practice. It gives them freedom, gives them flexibility. But as they spend more and more time in the trenches doing this job, they start looking around and thinking, if I had a decent paycheck with benefits, I can just jettison all this. And what you're shooting for there is maybe we can get a handle on the turnover. I mean, nobody's more tired of the turnover than me. It's constant. I will lose another one on December 31st. I'm going to interview somebody tomorrow that may not be able to take that slot. But it's just a constant struggle.
So the ASR says that the 2022 cost, excuse me, is a little over $5,000. What is it on an annualized basis, or is that annualized for the whole year? Is that just the remainder of the year?
No, he will go, this person would go up to what we talked about for 2023, will go to 108, then 110, then 112 for an annual salary. And again, that is based on competition. And I don't look to King County to compete. All I got to do is go to the midpoint of the Blue Bridge. And that's what drives a lot of it.
Since you've raised other counties, what are some of our, what we call comparator counties ones of like size. What are they doing in terms of contract defense attorneys versus staff defense attorneys?
I usually stop looking at the other counties after I see what the bottom line is, what they're paying them. You take a county like Grant, which has always had that reputation of throwing massive amounts of money at it. So much money that they got in big trouble 20, 25 years ago. It was a major scandal, and brought the whole system to its knees. But counties like Garfield, pretty well heeled. You go down around Pomeroy down in there, a lot of wheat money. I think they have probably more money to play with sometimes than we do, given the nature of the county.
Yeah, fiscal capacity is certainly part of the discussion, but what I was trying to get to is, are the comparator counties using contract employees for their defense work? They using staff defense attorneys, or is it a mix?
If you want to look at Grant, I think Grant's still got a contract system. I think they're contracting with 3 or 4 lawyers, locals, to do their work, the last I looked.
What does Benton do?
Benton is a mixed system. So, and I'm not sure where Mike wants to go over there, if he wants to go 100% employee or if he wants to just keep it mixed for a while. Right now, the system is in such flux. The juvenile system is going to be completely overturned December 31st, which is good in a way. We're going to be out of it. You won't be out of it, like you talked about the remodel. I'll be out of it, at least on the civil side, because Seattle's going to take that over. But my guess is Seattle says they'll come and take it over, but then they'll be coming to you for more money.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'd like to be wrong on that.
Well, we're all familiar with the concept of innocent until proven guilty. The only thing that really makes me not the only thing, one of the things that makes me really nervous about that premise is if for some reason you don't have the means to hire an attorney and they introduce you to your attorney and this is the lowest cost option that the public could find to defend you, I'm not sure how that works out.
That went out the door years ago. You just can't do that anymore without getting caught. That's totally unrealistic. By the
No,
same token,
I'm not suggesting we'd go to lowest cost. What I'm saying is that you've already articulated the benefits of staff attorneys. You have more consistency. You tend to attract older, more competent, more experienced attorneys. You have less revolving door. You have all these advantages that all seem to speak to more experienced, potentially more competent counsel. And on the contractor side, you tend to have younger attorneys, as by your description, who are multitasking, running their own business and being a practitioner of law and doing a contract. And if I were a person without means and had to have the state provide an attorney, I think I'd rather have the staff counsel as opposed to the young attorney. And the point that I'm driving to is that in terms of equity of representation, I think the staff counsel sounds to me, as I'm certainly not an attorney, but from what you're telling me, it sounds like that's the better option for the person who needs that counsel. So the question is, how do I weigh that against what it costs the taxpayers to provide it? And it sounds like it's an extra $5,000 this year, but that's only for the remaining 3 or 4 months of the year. Is that right?
that's correct, and then it'll go up January 1st.
Okay, so just in round numbers, the difference between a contract attorney and a staff attorney, both doing the same kind of cases with the same case caps, how much money difference are we talking?
Do some adding and subtracting.
Okay.
All I care
I
about-
know you. You are a lot smarter than that.
All I'm saying is, it wouldn't matter whether it was a contractor, and it wouldn't matter whether it's staff employee. Do not judge your system by what the defendant wants or what the defendant thinks he's getting.
Well,
That-
I appreciate your opinion on that. You've just articulated a bunch of differences between the two, and my job is to weigh the value that the county and the taxpayers get against what it costs, and I'm trying to find out how much it costs, and it sounds to me like it's about $40,000 a year per attorney.
It may be that, I don't know right now off the top of my head. I can go back and try to do that for you. What I'm looking at now is it's incremental. That's all I care about. I'm not saying let's do it all at once, because that is totally unworkable. I'm saying that
I'm with you there.
if you're interested in it, this is the way we should approach it, incrementally.
Yeah. So just to close this out, I spend a lot of my work at the state with the Association of Counties and Legislative Steering Committee, battling with the state legislature for more funding for indigent defense. Because as we know, by law and by our, I think it's actually in the state constitution, they're obligated to pay for it, all of it, and they pay for 20 to 30% of it.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. If the state was holding up their obligation to pay all these costs, we'd have this problem solved. And so now that it's on us, I'm just trying to weigh out the merits. And if we were to go to all staff attorneys, would it change the total number of attorneys? I wouldn't think so, would it?
No,
Okay.
no.
All right.
Not given the current trend we're seeing in number of filings. That's only going to keep going up.
Okay. Well, I'll just add, and then I'll stop. This is an issue that's really, really easy to underestimate the significance of it, in my opinion. We have a lot of staff that come and they want grade increases, they want, various things, and I don't begrudge anybody for asking for the opportunity to better their situation. But this one comes with constitutional obligations. It comes with a legislature that's not meeting those constitutional obligations. And if the county doesn't step up and do it, it's the citizen who, let's remember, they're innocent till proven guilty. So it's the innocent citizen that hasn't gone to trial yet that bears the brunt of the legislature not doing their job and us not picking up the slack whether we like it or not.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, Mr. Ziegler, I just want to get this straight here. The financial impact for this year is $5,167, and that takes him up to a grade 20, step 4.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you stated that next year his salary will go to 108,
And that is running right in tandem to Benton.
and then the next year after that 110.
It
So,
goes to 110, 112. We just did the same thing for the last 3-year go-around.
so we're gonna be looking at a $13,000.
This will be the staff person right here. Our first staffer on the felony panel.
It is resolution number 2022-223.
Move to approve resolution 2022-223 in the matter of approval to hire a public defense attorney 2 at step 4 as requested by OPD.
Second. Discussion.
I think I probably said 20.
Never too much. I can assure you this is not going to go away. The west side seems to think all we got to do is back a dump truck full of money up, tip the bed up, and we'll solve all our problems.
Bottom line, if you understand and deeply care about liberty, I don't know how you don't fund this.
I agree with that. It's just whose money's going to get used.
I'm fighting to get the state to live up to their obligation.
Yeah.
Until then, liberty matters enough that we need to support it.
Get a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that takes us down to the next item on the agenda, which is the position and classification for Office of Public Defense. Mr. Ziegler.
Again, I tried to make the ASR as succinct as I could, but as comprehensive as I could. The underlying basis is the simple expansion of the caseloads, the COVID backlog, what that's necessitated down there. And again, this final proposal here represents a compromise after discussions with the appropriate parties. We went from 14 to 15 to 16, back to 15, and concluded that 16 was the appropriate one and a change of title. I've already started reviewing applications for the assistant position. And I'm hoping we get somebody in there as soon as possible on that. That person I do have space for right now. And we're starting to figure out how we're going to structure that. Because I want that person up and working as fast as possible.
Questions? Entertain a motion.
2022-224.
Fiscal impact, I'll just admit, it's kind of a pet peeve when somebody tells me the fiscal impact only reflects like the last 3 or 4 months. That's the 2022 fiscal impact, and yours actually says 1,038 for 2022. So
Right.
thank you for articulating that it's a specific year. Usually it just has a number. I think the last one maybe just had a number. What is it on an annual basis? About 4,000?
Yes.
And this is a position, if I recall, that about 4 years ago was evaluated. The duties and responsibilities were articulated. The position description and title were all changed because it didn't reflect the level of responsibility that the position had.
Exactly.
Significantly higher than the way it was graded.
But it did reflect what Keith and I talked at the time I was retained by the county. We envisioned that this job was going to expand, but we underestimated how fast it was going to expand and what the scope of the duties would be.
So we've got a position that's been evaluated, it's been given a new title reflecting the duties.
That's correct.
The evaluation, the title all said that the job is here and is currently compensated here, and this corrects that.
And I have no doubts about that at all.
Okay. Move for approval of resolution 2022-224, the matter of position reclassification for OPD's administrative assistant.
I second. There's no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
And with that, we'll move down to the closed record hearing, zone change. There. And at this time, I'll open the closed record hearing.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know why that was hanging around that. Whoops. Thank you, Chair. As stated, this is a zone change request. It's for the South Columbia Irrigation District. Parcel number is 123491025, located at 60 Lateral Drive, Eltopia. It's generally located east and north of School Road and west and south of Eltopia West Road. Comp plan designation for this area is rural settlement. Property size is 6.22 acres, and the current zoning is rural community 1. And the request is to change the zoning from rural community 1 to general industrial, I2. This is the site. Right there, it's an odd shape. This is an existing skibbit facility, if I were, yeah, and then they're seeking to, they've acquired this property. The history of this property was originally, it was the USBR, so I apologize, it was not BPA. It was USBR, bought this back in like 1961. They were using it as like a bed down yard and things like that for the irrigation project. They subsequently sold it once they determined that it was basically excess land they didn't need anymore. They sold it to the school, Pasco School District, and that's who Skibbit. And then they've sold it a couple more times, and now Skibbit has control of the property. So, yes. Yep. It's in the SEPA checklist. Yep. 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 It's Columbia, yes, yes, sorry.
I think people know what USDR through recognition.
Right.
The green area in the structure is right above the arrow point. Tell me again what that is, I couldn't hear you.
I recall that's a Skibbit, that South Columbia has a facility there, and that's what they're, so.
Using your cursor, would you draw a line around all the irrigation district property there?
Including this piece? Right now, it's,
All of it that's contiguous.
all right, so this would be the entire, it would be this block.
Okay. And are those properties that appear to be surrounding it residential?
This, yes, this is, these properties are all, here, if I can go to the next slide, it's got a zoning map, and that'll give you an idea of the current zoning. So these are RC1, and these are either vacant or residential. This is vacant, as you could saw, and then these are also, well, this one here, one of these is a school. Now I gotta go back to the, so we have a school, I believe this is the school, if I recall correct. Yes, that's the school. So you have a school, church kind of operation going on there. It's a church, they also have some Sunday school and stuff like that. So that's these activities over here. This is residential, this is a church. So it's a public building that has public gatherings. It's not residential. And then that's residential.
And so the land is currently in a Lambert, a limited area of more intensive rural development, but that's essentially residential development in a Lambert, right?
No, Lammerts are a mix. They are specifically, this is one of the areas
Actually both, I think, but
that,
this one is a mix.
yes, this is similar to Basin City. Eltopia is kind of designated as a rural center where a mix of uses should be developed. These are site pictures. On May 26, notified, basically followed all the required noticing requirements, technical agencies, property owners within 500 feet, and posted in the Franklin County Graphic. Posted the property with the land use action sign and submitted the SEPA to the registry, which was recorded as number 202-202-637. So Franklin County comp plan map, guides to development. So all of our zoning changes are based on the comp plan first. As mentioned earlier, this is rural settlement, and as stated by Commissioner Peck, this is a local area more intense rural development, or LAMERD. The current zoning of the subject property is RC1, to the north is C2, and to the south and east is RC1. However, the uses to the east aren't residential at this point, immediately adjacent. Minimum lot size for the current zoning district is RC1, in RC1 is 1 acre. but there is no minimum lot size in zoning district I2. Rezone is consistent with comp plan designation of rural settlement, as mentioned. Rural settlement is to have a mix of uses that are primarily there to serve the rural community. A rezone will allow for a more intensive use of the land upon any further subdivision or short platting. We received no public comments regarding this proposal, and we did receive comments from the following agencies: Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, Colville Confederated Tribes, Public Works, and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. So suggested conditions are...
Derek, before we go past the comments.
Yep.
I'm assuming that SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Officer, their comments were the standard responsibilities if you come across artifacts or other items?
Yeah, that's actually one of the, normally on a rezone, we generally have 3 conditions. This one's got 4. They did request a, and,
Well, could we go back one slide, please?
yep.
Okay, so you received comments from the following agency. Are you going to go through those?
The comments, the
Right.
specific comments?
Well, at least summarize them.
Yeah, so Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation concurred with the Colville Confederated Tribe, and what they would want is, at the time of any ground disturbing activity, that they actually do a survey of the ground to make sure that there's no artifacts there.
Yep.
But not at this time. See, they've become more active in their commenting.
That's a change.
Yeah, normally we don't even, on a rezone, we wouldn't get a comment from them because there's no actual disturbance activity going on, and it's usually at the time of development of the site that they engage.
Did they articulate in the record with their comment what a survey constitutes?
That's based, they don't describe it per se. Basically, it's a process that's articulated under the state archaeological preservation.
Okay.
You have to go get a licensed archaeologist. There's a list of those. You pick from that list. They come in, they do an assessment of the site, and then they formulate a report. They submit that report or what they're going to recommend. Then DAHP and the tribes review that, and they'll either challenge it or concur. Final disposition of that is with the county as far as how we're going to enforce it, but that's how that process plays out.
Okay, so to be clear, it's a comment, not a condition of approval.
We are suggesting that it is a condition of approval at the time of development of the site.
So I want to stay in the record here.
Mhm.
So as much as I want to give comparative examples to a shoreline property or Sacagawea Park, I'll say it this way. Based on where this is located, it doesn't seem to be any higher likelihood than 98% of the county. And my concern is that this invokes a new standard that I haven't seen, that I can recall in 14 years of doing these. And I think it's something we ought to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Are we obligated to include that in the conditions of approval?
The county has the power to set what conditions it is. We are to advise and consult with the tribes.
Okay,
Now, as a matter of policy, due to our lack of expertise with regard to archaeological studies, staff tends to defer to the recommendations of DHP and the tribe.
I understand, and please, correct me if I've got this wrong, but in the past, I have to stay in the record here. I'm surprised this record reads the way that it does. I would expect it to read like all the others I've seen, which is, if in the process of any development, ground disturbance, you should come across any artifacts, remains, et cetera, we would want you to stop work and consult State Department of Archaeology, Historic Preservation, SHPO, and so forth. Am I right in my sense that this is a significant change? This now requires you to have a licensed archaeologist on site prior to any or at the time of any ground disturbance?
That is the request from the tribes, yes. And it is.
So I see that as additional cost. I see that as a significant change in historical practice. And again, if this were an area that was known to have a high probability, that had historical records of Native American settlements there or something, I might view it differently, but I mean, the standard would apply throughout virtually all the county. And so we're effectively taking the input and levying those costs and responsibilities on not just the irrigation district, but the next person who wants to build a house. And now I'm starting to take us outside the record, so please don't go there, but
The process involved here is the SEPA process.
right?
Building a house does not trigger a SEPA usually.
Well, that's a good point, yeah.
But
typically.
the point you're making, I believe, is an accurate representation, that this is a significant change. Normally, we would not have, like I said, since I've been here, this is the first time they've commented on a zone change.
And they've required
They've requested
a
that
survey.
we require.
Well, they've requested it?
Yeah, they don't have statutory authority over the county. Staff defers to DAHP as the subject experts.
Okay, all
on
right.
that. So
I've taken enough time.
Ours is a recommendation.
Yeah, okay, I've taken enough time. It is a significant change. It does have implications. I'll figure out how to handle the wording later on.
So do you think that that language is in there because it's with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation?
I wouldn't speak to that as to the why. Now I'm trying to remember sometime, and it may be, I would have to.
And the U.S.
Sometimes due to the fact that there's federal funding involved potentially or whatnot,
Yep.
it may be that there's something in the SEPA checklist.
So what were the comments from the Public Works and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation?
The Bureau, just a second, I apologize, I don't have them memorized. That's the tribe comment. Then DHP agreed with that, and that's kind of where we are with that. So DHP concurred with the Colville's comment letter, and that was their comment, so that's why that was
Okay.
forwarded as a recommendation.
But as you said a couple of times, the comment was they request it, and you followed it with they don't have any statutory authority to require it, and you followed that with it'll come to the county to determine whether or not we actually require that.
That is correct.
Okay.
So the Bureau's comment, just notifying that, you need to be aware of existing facilities in the area. It's what we call their standard comment.
Okay.
It doesn't call out anything in particular, and it says all the proposals within CBP and SCIBID, it does not involve any CBP facilities. They have no comment regarding this proposal's impact.
Okay.
So, and then Public Works, road approach is required, and any utility extension, the road approach at the time of development. And then if they have to cut the road or anything like that, that'll be discussed at the time of project.
So Derek, Irrigation District already owns it, so.
Correct.
USBR, Bureau of Reclamation, has been out of the picture for some time, so there's no
Yes.
federal money involved in a transfer. Is there any other federal money anywhere in this record that touches this?
I
that
don't
you can
have
think
that
of?
information. I have no idea of their funding and where that's coming from.
For example, the intended use is not a federally funded development?
Not that I'm aware of.
You understand why I'm asking?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
understanding is that it's for an initial storage facility so that they can store, equipment, materials, and then eventually they'll put in a maintenance shop. They haven't exactly tagged down when that would occur, but that's the primary utilization, is basically expanding their maintenance and upkeep facilities and their ability to get out into their proximity of the facility. So that was what they articulated, was it was for maintenance and material storage primarily.
All right.
And then,
So is there any other questions?
Cultural resource survey will be required prior to the issuance of any building permit. So that's condition number 3,
correct.
okay? And if you go back a slide so I can see 1 and 2.
So 1, 2, and 3, we are standard rezone, because due to the fact we don't limit, the zone is what the zone is. They will have to come in and go through whichever process under regulation to develop whatever it is they're seeking to develop.
Yeah. My question about federal money, obviously, is the last 3 words of condition 2.
Whoops.
But that's all right. You
Yeah.
can go to the next one now. So, based on comments, a cultural resource survey will be required. So that's a decision that we're making here locally, because you've already told me that it's a request and they don't, so. And then 4, road and access is standard,
Right.
okay?
And regarding our comments, our conditions of approval recommendations, and that question about the federal funding, at the time of their development of the site, as mentioned in condition 2, if there are requirements associated with that funding, it's on them at the time of development to ensure that they meet those requirements.
Yeah, well, as I read it, we're invoking a standard that is not required for us to do. And so you can expect that if I move for approval of this, that condition 3 is going to have a word change, and it's not going to be will, it'll be may.
And that's entirely within
I
the board's
understand.
purview.
Just giving you a heads
It
up.
could even be stricken if that was the desire of the
No, I
board.
think it's fine to highlight it. I don't want to invoke a statutory obligation from the county that isn't required anywhere else. And this way you can do it on a case by case. If somebody brings forward evidence and it makes it reasonable to do it, then we can reconsider then.
Yep.
Okay. I don't recall, was that all the conditions?
Yeah, that was it, sorry. Those are the 4, and this is a suggested motion.
Okay, well, I'll wait till we close the closed record for any motions.
All right, if there's no more discussion, I will close the closed record hearing and entertain a motion.
Would you go to the, that last slide you had up?
Yep.
Those 5 findings of fact, none of them bear on the,
Do you want me to reopen the meeting?
no, it's just a staff question.
Okay.
Those 5 findings of fact, they don't bear on that one condition that we were discussing.
No.
I didn't think so. Okay, I just didn't want to go through all that again. It was,
I'm trying
I'm
to.
sorry to interrupt, Derek.
I got 'em.
Go ahead.
Under, as I'm reading the findings of fact, the 4th finding of the 5 is the same requirement. It says conditions are required to be imposed in order to mitigate any significant adverse impacts. A cultural resource survey will be required.
yeah.
Okay,
And that's on my screen right
apologize.
now. That's
Yeah.
why I asked
I
that.
apologize.
All right, that's fine. We're good.
We can modify, again, that can be modified, or.
Sure. Well, we can modify it via the motion.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Move to approve ordinance 05-200 with the following changes to the staff package presented. Change number 1 is that finding of fact 4 is excluded?
It would be modified to conditions are not required.
Give me just a moment.
Because the findings of fact always exist. It's just a question of whether the proposal has this or doesn't have
Well, I
that.
excluded it.
Could we,
Yeah, I'll restate the motion in a moment. The inclusion of subparagraph A in 4 is problematic because this is a finding of fact, and you've included a county directive.
Yep.
And so A shouldn't be there at all. There are conditions to be imposed for roads and aprons and other things. So with the board's blessing, I'll take another run at this now that we know that that's in the finding of fact.
Yeah.
So I move for approval of ordinance 05-2022 with the following stipulations. 1, in the findings of fact, subparagraph A, alpha, under finding of fact 4, shall be omitted. And 2, Derek, if you go back a slide for me.
Yep.
Suggested condition of approval number 3 shall be edited such that the second paragraph reads, a cultural resource survey may be required, as opposed to its current writing, which says will be required.
Okay.
Second. So there's been a motion and a second for the approval of ordinance 05-2022 with changes that have been added. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you,
Next,
Chair.
we'll move down to the public works requests. That would be Mr. Erdman.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, as you know, several changes have occurred at the Public Works Department over the last year. This has required our department to reorganize internally, with some staff taking on duties currently outside the scope of their positions. To mitigate that situation, the Public Works Department brings before you 4 personal action forms. Chief of Road Maintenance Operations, which was formerly known as Road Superintendent, Assistant Director, County Surveyor, which fills the void created by the consolidation of the Director and County Engineer, and now gives us an Assistant Director, Fleet Manager, and the Financial and Administrative Services Manager. These key positions form the leadership of the department and are responsible for its current success. The Assistant Director and Division Managers perform critical tasks that support the department and the Director County Engineer in providing the necessary services that the Public Works Department provide for the county and its citizens. The success of the department depends on the quality of its leaders. The Assistant Director and Division Manager are the link that take the goals and directions of the department and bring it into reality. By approving these personal action forms, I believe that this will provide strong leadership, continuity of operations now into the future, as well as making the department more competitive in the job market when the need arises to fill these positions. This will be the first steps in setting up the Public Works Department on for continued success in line with organizational goals and succession planning. I'd like to state that we have been working ad hoc in this structure for the past 8 months. I thank you for your consideration in this matter, and Mrs. Stark and I will try and answer any questions that you have.
Questions?
What's your turnover history in the last 2 years?
30%?
Any of these positions affected?
Yes.
Which ones?
Roads, in a sense, the chief road maintenance operations. We made a change in that structure and let someone go and unified the department to make it run more smoothly and more unified, which has been successful.
Well, I appreciate your candor in actually answering the question I asked. Let me ask it a little differently.
Okay. Pardon.
What have you seen for turnover for voluntary turnover in the last couple of years?
Oh,
What
well,
you would
I
consider
sort of
market-driven.
misstated the number because looking back on it, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of engineering technical staff. We have turned over 50%. And in that turnover, and this has just been really since the first of the year, in that turnover, we have traded 27 years of combined experience and replaced it with people that are brand new. So 27 to 0.
Well, and I get that, and I understand.
We're starting.
How does that bear on these 4 positions?
Well, essentially.
Because that's really what I'm trying to get to is if you're looking to upgrade these and pay these positions more money, it's either because they're currently undergraded and undercompensated and we're taking advantage of people and we shouldn't.
Yes.
Or inflation, but typically you don't use inflation to justify grade changes in position titles, right? Has the market changed significantly and/or the duties and responsibilities of these positions changed?
The duties and responsibilities are what driving these particular 4.
Okay.
With the combining of the director and county engineer into one position. Plus, there was already some existing inequity in the way the division managers were compensated or treated that I wanted to rectify. But mostly, it's all 3 of these positions have similar responsibilities, just different duties, which are directly serve my position.
Mm-hmm. Is there any trade-off in all this? Any streamlining? Have you eliminated any positions or?
Well, yes, we have actually. I mean, with 1A, we.
And again, I didn't ask it very well. Let me try it this way.
Okay.
If we were to approve all 4 of these, what sort of indirect efficiencies might that bring that would help us justify these costs?
Well, it would maintain this current level of leadership and staff that we have. As I stated, we're working ad hocly in this structure, and I have people that are working, particularly what we're asking for the chief of road maintenance operation. He's currently working in a position that doesn't exist and outside his normal scope of duties.
So would you just take a minute and sort of walk everybody through, because I'm not sure everybody knows this history, of the transition to having a combined public works director and engineer?
Well,
what we previously had and how we do it now.
Okay. Previously, prior 7 years, we had a separate county engineer and a separate public works director. Part of that gave some of the duties of the county engineer to oversight on the road maintenance directly as a supervisor. And with 2 road supervisors acting as the lieutenants for the county engineer. That structure wasn't very efficient. It took a lot of time away from the county engineer's job, which is also to oversee the engineering and funding and grants. It also had an effect of essentially splitting the county into north and south. And after the changes that I stated earlier occurred in the department, we kind of merged both north and south into one maintenance division, and we found that our productivity and morale have gone way up.
So fair to say that we eliminated the second most highly compensated position in the department,
Correct.
Which was a separate county road engineer, combined that with the public works director, and a lot of the duties that that highly paid engineer was doing have now been shared with these other positions, which has elevated their responsibilities.
Correct.
So while it's been a little bit of a delay in the process, these are in large measure paid for by the savings of that separate county engineer position being
Yes.
combined with the public works director.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
Listen, I'm batting about 0 for 3 in how I ask questions today. I know what I want to ask, but sometimes it doesn't come out. But But I think that history is important, because when we look at these, we look at, okay, what's the taxpayer getting for these increased costs? And the answer is the taxpayers have already gotten some benefit, which is
Correct.
the second most highly compensated position, the county engineer, has gone away. It's just that that was behind us, and people have just been picking up the slack.
Correct.
And now those savings can be used to compensate these positions properly.
Yes.
Okay. Thought that's what you meant.
Sorry.
Listen, your
Yeah, I'm an
presentation
engineer.
was
You just gotta
fine.
put it, straight
It's-
down for me.
I've been told more than once I don't hear very well.
So along those lines, I'd just like to add that on our resolution here, 2022-227, is explained that out and the savings to the county, $72,654 the county's going to save with this.
Correct.
And then the next year, it'll be 76. We're actually going to be saving more money every year as this goes on. And I thought that was well put together, so thank you very much for that. So if there's no more discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
And we do have 4 separate.
Right, there's 4. There's a chief road maintenance supervisor, which is 226, assistant public works director, county surveyor, 227, fleet manager, 228, financial and administrative service manager, 229. So we'll start with 226.
I'm not prepared to make any motions. The chair wants to, he can. Would you speak to those cost savings?
I'll let Mrs. Stark answer that. She put the financials together, and she speaks to that
Yeah,
much better than
in
I.
particular, where the funds are coming from. So,
Okay,
I
well,
mean, it's one thing for us to read the ASR and have this data, but the people that are writing the checks and paying the taxes,
right.
I think some explanation is
Well,
appropriate.
This shortest answer, and I think most direct, is that over the past year, we've shed around $200,000 in salary in the Public Works Department. This compensation is but a fraction of what we've already shed, bring back, so.
And you don't anticipate any of those positions coming back?
Oh,
Well, you're talking about costs that you've shed.
No, I don't at this time.
Yeah, maybe give us just a little insight as to those costs that you've shed.
Well, there's approximately $130,000 a year without benefits and straight salary from the having the county engineer.
Right, we've covered
job
that.
And then when we made changes in road maintenance, we also shed, I think, approximately $80,000 or more a year.
So this is when you went from 2 north-south to just the one, the
Right.
road supervisor. Got that? And so those are the savings you're talking about?
Right.
Okay, all right. Well, we covered those in our discussion, but from the chairman's remarks, I thought maybe there were some other savings that maybe I hadn't addressed or that I had missed, so appreciate that. Okay. Does anybody object to, well, no, Keith, we can't do these as a batch, can we? We'll do them
No.
separately.
Yep.
All right, move to approve Resolution 2022-226 as presented.
Second. There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-226. All in favor, say aye.
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 Move for approval of Resolution 2022-227 as presented.
Second. There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-227. All in favor, say aye.
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 Move for approval of Resolution 2022-228 as presented.
Been a motion, second. There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-228 as presented. All in favor, say aye.
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 And move for approval of Resolution 2022-229 as presented.
Second. There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-229. All in favor, say aye.
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 Greg, thanks very much. Please understand that about 90% of the questions I ask, they're in the read-aheads, and I've read them.
I don't
but
mind them at all.
There's thousands of people, hopefully, that this information gets through our videos.
If I didn't muddle up the answers too much.
No, they deserve to hear the discussion. We shouldn't just come in here and make motions and approve
No,
stuff.
I completely
Thanks.
agree with that.
Craig, I just want to say thank you for consolidating this and saving the county money and doing a great job while you did it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll add that I have a terrific staff that do tremendous work, and that is truly the key to the success.
That's a sign of a great leader when you shed all the. All right, next we'll move down to administration office business. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I just have one item for consideration today. The city of Pasco has been approached with the potential approval of a marijuana store in downtown Pasco. Commissioner Mullen asked me to raise this issue of whether this Board of Commissioners would be interested in writing or supporting a letter in opposition to that request. I don't have all of the specific details of where that potential location is. I know there's been some media coverage of that, but the question is asking for direction of whether I should draft such a letter and what the level of support for that kind of a letter would be.
Keith, what's the timing on the issue?
I think it's fairly quick. I'm not quite sure. This came before me this morning, so I haven't had time to research all of the details. But I know the city of Pasco recently heard it in one of their city council meetings.
Yeah, they've been talking about the issue for the last couple of months at least.
Right. So I suspect this is fairly urgent if we're going to oppose it or support it.
Yeah, I would want to hear Commissioner Mullen's take on it. And it's unfortunate he can't be here today.
He is opposed to the citing of a marijuana shop in Pasco and is asking for fellow commissioners to support a letter of opposition to that.
Well, I get that. As I was just saying to Craig, I think this is, especially this, is something that ought to have some public discussion, not just us saying yes or no. So my answer is I'm happy to entertain it, but I'd like to have some public discussion, and I'd prefer to have all three commissioners here for that.
I can add that to next week's agenda. I'll have to check to make sure that that's not too late for us. I don't know if the city council is hearing that this next week or not.
Well, I would be in favor of putting my name on a letter because we don't need a magnet to bring more of the homeless to the Pasco.
Just for the benefit of the public, the county already has an ordinance in place that prohibits retail sales of marijuana in Franklin County, but of course that doesn't apply within the incorporated area in the city of Pasco.
Yeah, so I make it a real point when I talk about the county to say the unincorporated Franklin County, which is
Correct.
our jurisdiction. And while there's generally not a lot of harm in expressing one's opinion to the city, I'm not sure I want the city telling us what to do either. And a lot has changed with respect to the state's view on the matter, and there's several years of experience now that we've had, and I'm generally of the same mind I was when I voted to oppose all forms of marijuana in unincorporated Franklin County. But I don't want to be a commissioner who is making decisions on an issue we discussed several years ago without at least hearing from or knowing anything about the other side of the issue. It just seems like bad practice and bad policy. Generally opposed, but not inclined to make a commitment without hearing out the other side.
And we've already got that opposition in writing, so you might just reiterate it, is all we're saying is reiterate it to the city council that we are not in favor of this and we have that in position.
I don't have any objection to sharing the county's published ordinance and position on marijuana in unincorporated Franklin County. But without a discussion, I'm not going to join in on telling the city what they should or shouldn't do. even though it's just our opinion. If we can have a discussion about it, I'll likely come to the position that, or I'll likely remain at the position, I think it's a bad idea. But I'm just not interested in taking hard positions on volatile issues without at least giving the other side an opportunity to share their thoughts.
I don't know where you're going with that, Keith, but
Well,
it sounds like you have two commissioners that are,
I'll
Well-
visit with Commissioner Mullen again, but
Okay.
I anticipate that we'll bring this back for further discussion next Tuesday.
okay. So is there anything else?
And when you bring it back, feel free, bring a letter prepared, to go. I don't anticipate hearing anything that's going to change my point of view.
All right. So with that, we'll move down to public comment. Is there anybody for public comment?
Two things. George Dockstetter, South Landing Road. Mr. Ziegler's been before the county commissioners several times, and it's always brought up that it's mandated by the state, but they don't provide the funding. I'm just wondering, has there ever been a lawsuit brought and taken to the courts to force them to pay? And if there hasn't, maybe we ought to look into it as a county or as part of a joint county lawsuit to force the issue, get it before the Supreme Court, because that's probably where it would head, and make them make the decision if they can force us to do things they're not funding. The second thing I want to talk about, and I thought it was pretty scary, is the Colville Indian Reservation wanting us to require surveys on a rezone. It brought up a couple questions. Do we listen to the Colville Indians or do we listen to the Yakima Indians? I thought they were at war in our county over who was supposed to be the presiding tribe or whatever the hell they want to call ourselves. But this is, we're talking a zone change, and they're coming in with requirements for a zone change. I'd like to see something to where we just ignore their comments on non-vital matters. I don't care if they call it vital or what, but we're getting out to where we're giving control of what we do in our county to people that don't even live here. And I find it very disturbing. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, normally we don't get into discussion, but I'd like to just take a point of privilege for a minute and answer part of your question. The Washington State Association of Counties did undertake a lawsuit a few years back. It was under the broader category of unfunded mandates from the state legislature. They selected an issue that everybody thought was sort of an easy, no-brainer first win to establish some precedent. And instead of going after indigent defense, they went after the legislative requirement to add more ballot boxes in counties. It added a physical material cost of materials and construction, but it also requires additional staff time to send 2 individuals to go to every ballot box and collect the ballots. That went to the state Supreme Court and we lost. And we thought it was a no-brainer because they were directing us to take on additional work and cost for a state-mandated requirement of elections. And the answer was essentially the cover of adequate provision, that the legislature has provided adequate provision for the counties to pay for this by taxing their citizens. Now, that group was a fairly small group, State Association of Counties, set up to pursue matters like this, both locally and at the federal level. I'm one of that group of about 10. And we have looked at indigent defense as what we really care about because that's where the big dollars are and the big expense. And so we're in the process now of looking at how do we bring forward litigation. When I say we, I don't mean the county, I mean the Washington State Association of Counties, which is an independent organization. How do we bring forward legislation on behalf of the counties to get movement on this and avoid the courts coming back with the same answer, which is you've got adequate provision to tax your citizens. Thanks.
Thank you for addressing that unmandated requirement. I had the same comment. I want to just ask the commissioners if, I know this is not a correspondence, but nevertheless, has the Ben Franklin County Health Department said anything or done anything as far as looking at excess deaths and the reasons why that you know of?
I'm sorry, anything about what?
Excess deaths, not only in the United States, but in our own county over the past, 2 years?
I don't mean to be flippant. I'm not sure I know what you mean by excess deaths. Deaths above the normal statistical curve, sort of?
The only actual statistics that we're getting of any reliability is from the CDC, NIH, or so on, is excess deaths. You can't hide that.
Yeah, so.
And we're at about 500,000 in the
I
United
don't know.
States.
Yeah, I've not heard anything from the health district. I think that was your question.
Okay, yeah, that is. You may or may not be aware of some of the studies that have been done in the past, but the CDC and the NIH and the HHS are not coming up with anything. And so we're going overseas to find anything which is helpful to understand why we're actually losing about 500,000 plus a year extra. We know 100,000 right off the top is fentanyl, but that's not necessarily excess deaths because we have drug overdoses going on anyway. But the 5-year statistic, nevertheless, is still there. It's depending on the age group, probably the worst age group is 18 to 65, and we're looking at a 40% increase, which again is a sigma 8, 9. It's once in 2,000 year kind of thing. There's something happening. One study I just want to bring up real quickly, and that was done in 2009, and that was a linear look at 34 nations and their immunization of infants. And basically, the United States came out on the bottom of that, 34th out of 34 countries, meaning that we had more deaths than any other country because we had more immunizations than any other country. We have 26 required at the age of less than 1 year. It's actually more than that now. I just want to bring that to your attention, that is something probably we want to look at or at least understand. People are dying, and we don't know why. We have some good ideas, but the CDC and the NIH aren't looking at it. We do have studies in Germany, Australia, believe it or not, which I was kind of shocked about, but nevertheless, they are there. The other thing that I just want to throw out there to be thought about, the HSS, the federal government, is requiring those who are in Head Start in their kindergarten, preschool programs to wear masks. I think that that's a far-gone conclusion that is really, it's just not helpful. And for us to truly handicap, I mean, I want to use that word purposely. Children pick up cues from facial expression. Are you happy? Are you sad? I mean, it's just so common sense. If we do have Head Start students here, and I don't know if you can do anything, but I would certainly hope that we could push back on this and let these children come to school without masks on. Anyway, thank you for your work. You may not get thanks enough from us out here in the hinterlands, if you will. But by golly, to watch you work, I don't like to see you argue, but I sure like to see you work because it looks like you're protecting us and trying your best to make sure that the money is spent well and that government is running the way it should. And thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Anybody on the phone, Keith?
No.
Good morning again, Commissioners. I wanted to thank you, Commissioner Peck, for what you shared there and your concern about the Washington State Department of Archaeological and Historic Preservation. This is something that I've seen come on really, really fast in the last 6 years, and am very, very concerned about it. Something that was identified by Mr. Bratton and you, Mr. Peck, is that this does not apply when SEPA does not apply, and it does not apply in a single family residence. But watching the curve and knowing and seeing that government does not back up, it's a step-by-step process that I can see taking on more and more. And now they've gotten so bold as to want to intervene in a land use change. Looking at their website, their graph shows the Department, DAHP, and it says the Department of Archaeological and Historic Preservation, protect the past and shape the future. I don't think they should shape the future, especially in Franklin County. I appreciate protecting the past. I appreciate protecting and guarding our heritage, and I think that is definitely important. But these studies that 6 years ago that I hadn't heard of one and done a single one, I've done a lot of them now, and they range from $7,000 to north of $30,000 for an individual thing. And the most recent one I'd done is on a piece of ground that I bought that was a sand dune, and it cost almost $10,000 to do this study on that. And I think it's another example of running the cost of development up. And I appreciate you pointing that out, that this was a new place that they had gone, and I would encourage our county to be very, very careful to especially not put something that is not in law, to require something that is not mandated by law, and to certainly push against it, because I don't believe the Washington State Department of Archaeological and Historic Preservation should shape our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? All right, if there's no more business for the good of the county, this meeting is adjourned.